Hey folks, welcome back. In this video, I want to share some coloring techniques that can be useful whether you're working on a montage like this piece right here, or if you're just coloring in general. So what I've done is I've isolated one of the characters in the montage just so that we can see and work with her a little bit better. So what I've done here, if we look at my layer stack, her colors are underneath her inks. And we're going to work with this and use our magic wand tool to go ahead and add some selections for her cape. We'll go back to the base layer, Command J, Command U, and I want to pick something, just establish a very simple color palette. When in doubt, go monochromatic, which means different shades of a color. You can't go wrong with that. I would try to avoid using every color in the rainbow, just because you can. It just makes it for a much more, cluttered experience. So Command J, Command U. I'll also go back in with some blue. Maybe make that a little bit darker. And for these smaller areas right here, use the magic wand tool. And here, because I have an open gap, I'm switching to the lasso tool, holding down the Shift key. Go back to the base color layer, Command J, Command U. Change that to blue. Maybe make it a little bit more saturated. Click OK. And then we'll go in with her skin tone. Command J, Command U. And then for her boots, here's another selection technique. I could use the magic wand tool to select each of these individual bits, or I can just use the lasso tool and make an entire selection around the foot. And that's okay because the silhouette gives us that color constraint. So if I hit Command J and Command U, it's only going to affect the boot. I'll sample this color and use this for just some of the other accessories that she has. So I switch between these different selection tools as I work, and that's a perfectly normal thing. I've got this area here, which is negative space. I'll use my magic wand tool, go back to the base layer, hit Command X to cut that out. And let's go ahead and turn on our background layer so we can see that better. I forgot her arm. And then let's take a look and see. We got her fingers and her hand. So while I work, I'm preserving that bottommost layer that contains the color that outlines her entire silhouette. And that can come in handy, as we'll see here in a few moments. All right, sword. Make that somewhat gold. And we'll make that kind of a red ruby just to have it pop out. Again, these are just color flats, but now I'm picking colors that are more in line with what I think this character should look like. And so let's go back, and I want to choose my square brush to fill in some small areas here. We'll get the other sword, we'll make that gray. And this technique is applicable to pretty much every character that is in this montage, but I'm just isolating it so I can focus on just one character. We'll give her some makeup here, and we'll give her some lipstick. And we'll come back in and get the whites of her eyes. And then for her hair, if I go back to that base color, which is right here, what I can do is select all of the hair with the lasso tool. Command J, Command U. We'll give it kind of a reddish tint. And there's a few more areas here that I have to fill in. And I'll just quickly take care of that in real time. So I have my actual color flats now. And what I'll do is I'll take all of the layers that are above the color flats layer and I'll just merge them. So at this point, I have a lot of opportunity here, right? I can, these are all just flat colors. I can introduce textures, in other words, patterns or other elements that just add some visual interest to this character. I also want to think about material. Like right now, there's no sense of like whether something is metallic and reflective or whether something is made out of cloth. That's something that's just inferred by the layout, but I need to do, think about that in terms of color. So I'll start off by making a new layer above this flats layer, and I'll just add a little bit of highlight on this sword just to kind of give it that reflective gleam. This is like a ruby. I'll make that shiny. I'm just going in with some whites to add some highlights. The other thing I can also do here too is this cape is interesting, and I'm just going to change this up from my original take. I'll pick kind of a lighter blue color and I'll just make a pattern. So I'll just make something that looks visually interesting. And wherever I've got these folds, just like how folds lay out, there's going to be a little bit of an offset. And again, I'm just striking a chord with believability. I'm not necessarily focused on making this, 100% realistic. And that just breaks up the form. And it also creates a bunch of leading lines, right? Leading lines take the viewer to different parts of the composition. So I'll just quickly knock this out. I'm not going to be super precise about it. I'm putting that on its own layer. If I want to modify that, I can always go to FX. I can choose color overlay, and I can change the color very quickly, depending upon what I want. I want to go with something that's going to be lighter, just so that it's going to be more noticeable, so it creates some contrast. There's no point in putting a texture down if you can't really see it, right? So you want to make sure that it does stand out. Now what I'll do is I'll consider things like the light source, and for a montage, you can presumably have multiple light sources because they're all individual pieces that are put together. So what I'll do is I'll use my lasso tool, and let's assume the light source is coming from the top left. So that means, the parts of her hair that are towards the top will receive some light. We also have her face and her nose, the bridge of her nose, the cheeks. We'll get some light. Top part of her shoulder blade, and I'm just roughing this in. I'm holding down the Shift key to add to my selection. I might even go ahead and select part of her boots. We've got the other arm. So light's coming from the top left. So Command J, Command U. I'll make that a little bit lighter. And I can always come back in and sample this just to blend my values a little bit better. And I'm going to be adding some dark values or shading as well. Again, this is just the way that I work. I'm not saying that this is the way to work. I'm just saying that this is the way that works for me. Okay, so I've got that blocked in. Let me go ahead and add some shading. So underneath her neck, because the neck is being covered by the head, if I hit Command J, I can make that darker, and right away the neck recedes into the background. And also maybe a portion of her dress may be covered up. So Command J, Command U, see a little bit of shadows. And underneath her arm, right there, Command J, Command U. You can make that dark. And then what we can also do here is we can add, I like to add some white highlights, just for the shiniest parts where the light is at its strongest intensity on the form. Okay, so that gives us our character, and she has texture, she has highlights, she has mids, and she has dark values. And you could endlessly, work on that riff. You could basically create what you want. But let me show you something else that I think is also pretty cool. So just with this character isolated, I'll create a new solid color background just so that you can see this a little bit better. I'll just pick a reddish color. And then what I'll do is I'll go back to that silhouette layer. I can select it. I can choose stroke. And I can make this stroke white. And I can set it to point outside. I can set the thickness of the stroke. I'll keep it fairly thin. And that's one way that I can get this character to pop out. If she's the central character in this montage, she's going to stand out compared to all the other characters. Let me just toggle all the other layers back on. And I'll hide that brown background. You can see that she is popping out. Maybe I'll put that brown all the way in the back. So you can see how this is going to look as everything comes together. Right? Now, with that taken into account, so you can see that none of her lines are getting buried or appear to blend in with the characters that are in the background. So I use this to this coloring approach for each character or object within the montage. Now I want to show you a bonus tip. So if you've watched the video up until this point, let's see how we were able to get this kind of complex gradient. So what I'm going to do here, I'll just repeat this technique from scratch again. I will take my, I'll go to a brand new layer, and if I hold down Shift, Option, Command, E, that merges all of the visible layers into one layer. So that's the first step. The next step is I'll hit Command U. I'll drop the saturation down to where it is going to look like it's in grayscale. After I do that, the next step is I'll go ahead and create a mask. So if you click on the rectangle with a hollowed out circle in it, we can add a mask. Now the way the mask works is that anything in white is opaque. Anything that's black will allow us to see underneath that specific layer. So what I'll do is I'll select this mask, I'll hit my brush tool, and I'll pick my soft, round, pressure brush. So big soft brush is what I'm calling it here. And I'll pick my black color. And you want a big soft brush because when you start to press in, what you're seeing is that any place where you're seeing black, it's revealing the color underneath, which is pretty neat. And what this does is I'm having more of the color saturation in the central part of the composition, and having less saturation. So this is also pulling us from areas where we don't have much color into the color parts of the composition. So it's moving us into the center of the composition. So I think that might be a neat effect to go ahead and try out. And, it's just something that I feel like can really enhance your colors. And if you find value in this video, please give it a thumbs up. I do appreciate you watching these videos. Subscriber count is going up, and I thank you for all of that. As always, if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.